Good afternoon. Um, I represent an institution that actually trains kids and youths on two things: financial literacy and entrepreneurship. And what we tried to do when we started the company was this. I have always been a student for a good part of my lifetime, and I suspect most of you have been. When I started out, I actually decided to try and challenge the system, which is one of the topics here today, because in Malaysia, where I come from, you cannot do a double degree. I went up to the local university, which was accepted, and I said, I would like to do another degree. I was chosen to pick economics, and I said, I'd like to do another one. And the answer from the registrar was this: you cannot do another degree, because then you'll be depriving another student of a seat. That's the state of affairs. But I had friends abroad who were doing double degrees, so I thought I would try that. And what I did was, I actually told my dad, I cut a deal with my father, which you should do sometimes. I cut a deal with my dad and said, Dad, here's the deal. If you allow me to take another degree from a private college, for the first year, you pay for this, and I promise you I'll continue paying for it after that. Now, but as I was doing my double degree, and don't ask me how I managed this because I am not your typical student, I promise you that. But as I did that, I realized that both systems, one which was local and one which was foreign, they had a lot of similarities. And one of the similarities that you probably could attest to is this. There would be a lecturer or a teacher standing in front who would be talking to a class. What they're supposed to do is challenge you to think further. Hopefully, you would absorb most of what they're saying. The hopefully is really in caps. And then comes what's called an examination, a test. And we all go through this. You see, we don't question this process, and we haven't been questioning this process for years. So if you ask me today, which is going to be what I'm going to talk about for the next 18 minutes, would be, does the education system that's practiced around the world really nurture the passions that you have, or does it kill it? And my argument is it kills this. It really kills it. And why I say this is simple. You see, a friend of mine had her daughter go to preschool, and the daughter came back crying one day. And the mother asked the daughter, why are you crying? And the girl said, because today the teacher told me I did something really wrong. I did something really wrong. And the mother said, what did you do wrong? And the child said, we had art class, and the teacher said I didn't draw my favorite picnic right. So the mom asked, could I see this? And when she saw this, the only difference between what was right and wrong was that the girl had the leaves in purple, the coconut tree was orange, the sand was pink, and the waters were just a tad lilac. So that's wrong. You see, if we start telling kids to stop being creative in school, why do we argue when they come out to the workplace and not get creative? So, how do we help the young? This was a question I started with. How do we help the young discover their passion? My argument is this. No two people in this room or in any part of the world are the same. They won't be wired exactly the same. You may have similarities, you just won't have them to be the same. So why is it we have a system that insists that we all wired kind of like the same? Because we all go through, if you were in Malaysia, you would go through a system of education that assesses you in a certain fashion. And I've argued this with them. I said, what you're really doing is you're testing the kid's memory. You're just testing the kid's memory. That's all you're really doing. Because you and I know, after you leave the classroom for the exam hall, 2 weeks later, you can't sit for the same test again. You know, you all know what I'm saying. And that's what it really is. So if we wanted to do this, I think, first of all, we would have to ask ourselves the questions, do we have relevant passions to follow in the first place? Now, here's where it gets interesting. You see, if you had a passion in cooking, and you told that to your parents, and your parents were typically Asian 20 years ago. Today, because of all the reality TV shows, they talk a bit different. But 20 years ago, if you told your mom you wanted to have a career being a chef, she would take her rolling pin, and it would meet your head. And that's what used to happen because Asian parents saw education as a pathway to a job that would pay you money, hence you have to pick a passion that pays. And that's how they related this. Education was just a pathway leading to a job, leading to more money, and that's it. And for a long time, we believed in this. So when you went to school, here's what happened. You were told that certain passions paid and certain passions don't. So along the way, you moved along the pathway which said, if I was on the track that paid, I'd do well. If I was on a track that wouldn't pay, say like I'd be a sports person, because we all know how well sports people were paid in this country like 25 years ago, right? They weren't paid at all, almost. So most people decided if that was a passion, that wasn't relevant because I can't turn that into a career. So passions were related to careers that you can embark on. And that's what really happened. Okay. So the real question is, where do I find my passion? I'd like to change that question for you. It's about what value can I bring to this world? And that's an interesting question. You see, for everyone, I heard that about 50 of you in this room, for every one of the 50 of you in this room today, everyone can bring forth a different contribution towards a different field. You can. I cannot do everything that you can, and I don't expect you to be able to do everything I can. And that's the deal. Because we're not put on this earth. My belief is we're not put on this earth to be singular, to be individualistic, and to try and achieve goals. I think we're all bits and pieces of a big puzzle. And the aim is to come together and find those pieces and fit them together, and we solve what big picture they would be. But what the education system, or most education systems, do not do is address this issue. See, what they do is they make you individuals. You want evidence? Easy. How do you sit in an examination hall? Let me just figure out. I see many of you looking like you come from different countries, but I bet this is standard. The next person sitting closest to you would at least be 3 feet away, right? I know this for a fact. I've seen this in most countries in the world. And the reason why they do this is because they don't want you to collaborate, cooperate, or every other word that starts with C, including copy, right? Then you get out into the real world, and here's what happens. You get out into the real world, you're not expected to do that, you see. What you're expected to do is, when you have a task of a mission, you're expected to A, collaborate, B, cooperate, and C, the most common terminology used by everybody who's ever used Microsoft Word, copy-paste. We do this all the time. So it's interesting how we've got a system inbuilt in our community, in our society, that teaches us exactly what we won't be doing for the rest of our lives. And it's very easy to forget what value you can bring forward in that whole confusion of pathways. So what value do I bring? We don't question this. We don't. In fact, I think education should start from this. Helping you find yourself. Helping you find your mission. And what's your mission? When I think of passion, and when I first looked at this subject matter, I think passion is something that's got to burn within you. It's something that keeps you up at night. It's something that makes you yearn to do more, to go further, to run the extra mile, something to reach further. And we don't have this in education. I'm advocating that we change the way we teach, because if we do that, we change the way kids think, and if we keep doing this, ultimately, we'll change the way people lead their lives. And what I'm really saying is, instead of telling kids that they have to learn stuff that they won't use throughout their lives. I won't name those subjects because I realize I'm in a college right now. But there are lots of subjects that you just need to get a handle of and move on with life. But I think the greatest things that we should be teaching kids is to be observers of life. Because if they can learn to observe life, and if they can pick up from that, what a world of difference it would make to every single person. And then they'll discover what the real mission is. that we're not put on this earth just to pass through this course of life without leaving footprints in the sand, that we can make a difference. So I think if we found our mission, if we found what we are really here to do, without fear that it won't bring us money, without fear that what we love to do would not be an occupation, but instead, if we focus on being the best that we can be at what we know we can be good at, and we be so good at it that people cannot ignore us, you get paid for this. That's why it has evolved. That's why today you could have a reality show on cooking. And I used to be in advertising. If you told me this 20 years ago, I said, who would want to watch somebody else cook? Right? And I know all of you are watching somebody else cook, right? And it's happening today. And this guy who calls himself the naked chef, who's not really naked anyway, gets people watching this simply because he's good at what he does and it's his passion. So you can build a life around your passion if it really burns inside of you and you want to be the best at what you're good at. Another interesting thought. Most of us go through life thinking there is a passion within us that's waiting to be discovered. I'm here to challenge that. I'm telling you, there isn't one. This is the counter thought. There isn't really a passion inside of you, there isn't that goal inside of you that's just waiting to be discovered. In fact, everything that you do, the way that you think, how you lived, I believe has been shaped by the people around you, the things you see, the things you observe, things you read, and it shaped your mindset. So here's the deal. In this sense, how can I ever find a place where I can call this my passion? My answer is simple. If you understood the rules, you'd find it. Whatever it is that you come across that moves you, and if you focus long enough in doing it, and the book's written about this, if you really focus on this, and after focusing on it, it becomes you, ultimately, you would find that that becomes your passion. Have I changed passions along the way? Yes, I have. I used to love what I do, which was advertising. Then I used to love what I do, which was transferring documents to make money. Now I love what I do because I change people's minds. I go in, I tell kids that there are no limitations except the ones you accept. That if you don't have any self-limiting beliefs, the sky is really the limit. And if somebody around you tells you all the time that you can't do something, the one thing you got to do is not be with that somebody too much. And if we did that, then ultimately, if you're brave enough and take the bold step forward, I think you will find passion like you've never found it before. Be careful who you make as your friends, because the 5 most closest people, the closest people in the world to you, 5 of them, this has been proven many times through research. The 5 people whom you embrace as your closest friends are going to shape where you go for holidays, what you drive sometimes, how you wear, what you eat, if you exercise or you don't, and they're going to influence you. So here's the deal. Birds of a feather really do flock together. Make sure you find the right birds. And if you do that along the way, what happens is the human brain picks up on those signals. If you really believe that something burns inside of you, and that's a passion for you, if you truly believe in that, pick the 5 that's going to set you free, that's going to make you soar. Because if you do that repeatedly, someday you'll find yourself. And you'll find the passion that seems to elude you for a long time. Many people struggle with this. They say, look, for passion, I can't see the whole pathway, Michael. I mean, I really don't know what's ahead. My take on this is simple. The hardest step to take is the first one. If you just take that leap of faith, that first step, because you don't have to see the entire steps to take the first step. If you just took that one step forward, sometimes everything else becomes clearer. What if I make a mistake, Michael, when I take the first step? See, life is about taking turns when you need to take turns. Nobody said that the road has to be straight. There's no junction for you to stop and think. You can't turn left or right. There's no bridge to cross. There will always be bridges to cross. There will be always obstacles in the way. The challenge is, when you see them, do you have the courage inside to change? And change is permitted. Last time I checked, it's permitted. Okay, so I like to end with this. I like to end with a story that perhaps it will help you understand what passion is about. There was a man who was a teacher, and he wanted to be the best teacher there was in the world because teaching was a passion, but he just didn't know how to go about doing this. So one night, as he fell asleep, he had a dream, and he heard a voice, as most stories go. And this voice told him, one day, someday, a child will pass through your hands, and that child would ultimately grow up to be a leader in the global environment. That child would change the way people think, would change the way people live, and would bring communities together. And that child will pass through your hands. So this teacher decided from the very next morning when he woke up, I've got to find that child. I really have to find that child. So every child that came forward in every single class that he took, he paid close attention to each child, as if that child would be the one to be the chosen child. Years passed, hundreds, thousands of kids passed through his hands, but every single time he'd be looking for this one child that could change the world. 20 years later, in a newspaper article, it said that a particular student, ex-student of his, was recognized to have won a global award for peace. And he read the article very intensely because he found out that the child that they were talking about was his own daughter. Now what's interesting is what she said. She said that of all the teachers I've had in the world, the best teacher I've ever had was my dad. And she told this story, and of course, you know, as it would be, many people cried as she told this story, how the dad had paid a lot of attention to her. The moral of the story is really simple. There's something that you can do to touch somebody's life. If your passion was to find that person whose life you would touch, whose life you would change, and if you treated everyone who you came across as the person who could be the one you were destined to change the life of, then all of what you're trying to do with everything that is your passion would become a satisfaction that you could, on your dying bed, be really happy about. So my wish for you today is that you find you along this journey of life. Thank you very much.